Scheduled sign though. Is that? Oh, here we go. All right. So all of the technology seems to be saying that we are currently live. So hopefully that is the case. Looks like some of the comments are starting to show up. So if you can see this, you can let us know through bus just by posting a comment, so that we can know that things are going live and things are going really well. So first of all, welcome. This is our fireside chat with Robert. And I feel so privileged to have the opportunity to have the conversation with Robert and to bring you into this conversation as well. This is our first attempt at doing this as a live stream. So, in case there are any technical issues, Robert and I talked about this idea of we might switch to Zoom and publish the full recording later on YouTube or LinkedIn, but hopefully the technology gods will be good to us today and we'll be able to stay live and things are going to go really well. If you are looking for this video sometimes later, look for Coaching for Essence on LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook. You'll be able to find these videos, many more, as well as the community and the full Coaching from Essence course. So that's kind of the quick housekeeping thing that I wanted to share with you. So we'll get started with our conversation today. So there's a couple of things I wanted to let you know. First of all, this isn't an interview. I've done a million different interviews in the past, and what we wanted to do is we wanted to create something that would be more of a casual conversation between two people. And the idea is to bring you into that conversation with us. And so we can have it all together and have a fireside chat. So as we talk, please feel free to take notes, comments, considerations, any questions that you might have. If you post them on whatever platform you're looking at, they should pop up on our screen as well. I'll do my best to weave them in as the time goes for our time together. And if we don't fret. There will be lots of opportunities to connect with us, to connect with the community, and to connect with Robert as well. You can reach out individually after. So again, post your questions. We'd love to see them and see if we can weave them into the conversation. So let's start off with a couple of really quick introductions in terms of who Robert is and who I am, why we're here, and what we're going to talk about today. So a quick refresher of who Robert is. So Robert is the founder of Futurosity. He's the founder of Coaching from Essence, a coaching program. He has worked with leaders and founders and investors in Fortune 500 companies, many of them in Silicon Valley. He has developed the leadership curriculum program for Singularity University, and he's probably has 3 or 4 pages of different accolades that I could just keep listing off. But Robert is also a mentor that I always wish that I had earlier on in life. I have never had a leader like Robert, or a mentor, or someone to guide me or help me along my journey. And so I'm so incredibly grateful to have come across his work. He's my coach, he's my mentor, and he is my teacher as well. He is also someone that believed in me enough that I actually started believing in myself. And that was one of the major transformations that happened in my coaching journey and in the work that I do now. And he's this and a lot more to all of his clients and to all of his students. I kind of look at him as a beacon of transformation, as someone that I'm so incredibly grateful to be connected with. And I hope that if you're watching this, you might share the same feelings. So a little bit about me, just so in case you're wondering who I am and what my deal is. My name is Ernest Barbaric. I'm an executive coach. I work with leaders, founders, and investors, primarily in the impact and clean tech space. I founded a company called Elari Ventures last year, which specifically focuses on leadership development in the clean tech space. I've also done a number of different projects and things over the years, but this is who I am now, and this is what I do. So today we're going to have a conversation about coaching, leadership, meaningful work. When we originally talked about this, we were going to create a discussion around this idea of coaching from essence, what it is, and so people can get a bit of an idea of what it is. We can talk about the books and some of the things of how that work has impacted me and other people. So let me bring Robert on. So hopefully our backstage production is going to bring Robert on. There he is.
Hey,
Hello, Robert. Hey. And
Ernest,
yeah,
thank you so much for that introduction. I was really touched. Thank you.
mm,
I really appreciate that. And I see some familiar names in the comments too. So I'm really grateful for the people who've showed up and are watching this.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your work has had a major impact on me and my life, and I'm so grateful that we crossed paths. And
Hmm.
so, to I'll share kind of a funny thing. So before we hopped on a call, I went for a walk with. I have a friend who's a neuroscientist. I recorded this series with him called. Putting together something called the Neuroscience of Executive Performance. And
Hmm.
as we walked, I think I touched some grasses or something, and when I got home, excuse me, I rubbed my eyes, and so my eyes are all puffy, and I think I had some kind of a crazy allergic reaction. So in case I look weird or disfigured, that's what it is. This isn't normally the way that I look, but I thought I would put that out there as a precursor. So okay, listen, we have a lot of different things to chat about. What I thought might be kind of interesting is to just start the conversation around what is coaching from Essence? How did you view this project and what does it mean to you?
Yeah. Coaching from Essence, there's a few ways to think about what coaching from Essence is. First of all, coaching from Essence is a language for creating. So it's a loose network of ideas and models and frameworks for how to create a life you love, how to create a successful organization, really how to create anything that you want. But to understand what coaching from Essence is really about, you need to understand what essence is. So the
Mm,
essence of coaching from Essence is the conviction that everyone has a natural way of being in the world that's valuable without any thought or effort on their part. Or another way of saying it is, we all have a natural way of being good in the world.
mm,
Most of us create a false self in order to navigate. And we can talk more about that. But most of us become someone we're not because we think that's what we need to do in order to be successful. And so coaching from Essence is about learning to become more of who you are and creating from that. So the essence of coaching from Essence is this idea that you are naturally valuable. But the aim of coaching from Essence is to disentangle yourself from forms, to learn how to navigate forms, and ultimately to learn how to create forms. So, what do I mean by forms? Everything in the world, my desk, the computer, all of that is form. But so are our relationships, our jobs, our identities, our thoughts. Our thoughts are thought forms, our beliefs, right? So we live in a world of form. We get entangled in those forms. It's easy to lose yourself in your identity or think that you are your job, or lose yourself in a relationship, or lose yourself in material things, becoming too attached to material things. So part of coaching from Essence is learning how to disentangle yourself from those forms,
mm.
learning how to navigate a world of form, and then learning how to create forms that are more congruent and aligned with your essence. And by the way, organizations have essence too. So the more congruent they are in what they're creating, the more successful they are. So that's really what coaching from Essence is about.
So I've been exposed to your work a few years. I've read the book, went to the retreat.
Mm.
We've spent
Yep.
some time together coaching, and every time I hear this, it's interesting because it's not the first time I heard you describe it, but every time there's a bit
Yeah.
of a different flavor to it.
Hmm.
And the way that I'm interpreting some of this now and the way that I've applied it, it's almost like when you mentioned that there's this way that we think that we have to be in the world in order to be a certain way. It's almost like we're adding layers of masks or pretending, I guess, on top of our
Hmm.
authentic self, which is connected to the idea of essence. So the work is to peel that back and
Hmm.
to believe in that it does have value in the world. Is that
Yeah.
about the correct way to think
Yeah.
about it?
I mean, yeah, part of it is peeling away the false self. Part of it is discovering your true self, and then creating from that, so that what you're creating in your life
Mm,
is more resonant with who you really are. So that's really the work of coaching from Essence. Coaching from Essence is also just a training program for coaches who want to
mhm,
do more powerful work, and also want to create successful practices based on some of the values and principles of coaching from Essence. So one of the values is generosity, for example.
Right.
Okay. Um, so I've created a very successful practice by being generous. In fact, I've
Mhm.
given the entire course away. You can go through it 3 times on the community forum, or you can watch video from the retreat that you mentioned on YouTube. So I've given the core curriculum away, um, so that more people can have access to this material.
But there's a couple of things that you mentioned that I think might be
Mhm.
interesting to I guess explore a little bit more. The one that's most resonant for me is around this idea of generosity as a
Yep.
practice. There's a couple of thoughts, and I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on it. So one is around this idea that the way that you've presented this program, I wouldn't even call it program. It's not even a
Mhm.
philosophy. It's something more and
Mhm.
different.
Yeah.
It has certain inherent values, and it's also attracted a certain kind of people to you
Mhm.
that share those similar values. And
Yes.
so we can talk about this now, or we can talk about it later. But I found
Sure.
myself this to be one of the first communities that I've been a part of where I felt a strong connection with almost everybody that was in it. So
Mhm.
it was really easy to create strong connections.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, not on the flip side, but in addition, so the second thought was around this idea of generosity as a practice. You
Mhm.
are, I guess I'll talk a little bit about how that applies to me and how it might apply to others. I used to, parallel to my regular work, I would do some volunteer work here and there and offer to do some things for free here and there in my previous company in digital strategy, and then also with some
Mhm.
coaching. But it was never integrated into my own practice. And I think it was after learning from you that generosity is an integral part of my practice, where
Mhm.
I'll have pro bono clients. I will help however many people that I can.
Mhm.
I recently met some folks that are going through career transition, so I want to be able to help them.
Mhm.
What I'm curious about is why, how did you even come to this idea of integrating generosity as a key
Mhm.
element of this way of being, of this way of work?
So there are a few things that you mentioned there that are interesting. One is just this whole idea of generosity. One is the whole idea of community, because coaching from essence is also a community.
Hmm.
It's a community of coaches, and as you said, it's really a community that's come together around some shared values and intentions. So, for example, there are lots of coaching programs out there that are really just all about making more money.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with making more money. I mean, I also teach people how to create successful coaching practices, because it's very important to be able to sustain yourself if you want to do this work. And you should be well compensated for it. You're creating a lot of value. My clients are CEOs and executive teams. And so I get a very generous fee for the work that I do. It's important to be able to support yourself and sustain yourself so that you can do the work that you do. But I've also always had, at least a third of my practice has always been pro bono, where
Hmm.
I've always worked very intentionally to give as much of myself away as I could, because one of the principles is that we're here to serve. Uh, and there's kind of a deeper underlying idea here, which we can maybe talk about it in a little bit, which is, sort of what I call the essence choice, which is moving from self-interest, status seeking, scarcity, and survival to essence, abundance, service, and trust. But maybe we can come back to that. But yes, the community shares some values around service and generosity. We're here to help people, and we need to be supported in order to be able to do that work. So it's very important to know how to create a thriving practice. But creating a thriving practice is not the reason we're coaches. If you just want to make a lot of money, there are lots of ways to make a lot of
Right.
money. We're coaches because we want to serve people.
Hmm.
So you talk about generosity. The way I think about generosity is the beginner's practice of generosity is volunteering or giving money. If you have enough money, you can always donate somewhere. But for me, the idea of real generosity is being generous with your being, showing up fully, being open, being vulnerable, letting people see you, showing up as a coach as a full human being fully present for the relationship that you're creating with your clients. To me, that's generosity.
Hmm.
And you asked how did I come to this? I'm going to give you the very short version of it.
Yeah.
But I was a consultant and management trainer and facilitator and did all that kind of work for about 30 years before I went through a personal dark night of the soul. And this was 2015, 2016. I went through a period where I went through a period of heartbreak, emotional heartbreak, physical heartbreak. I had 2 heart operations in 2016. And I realized that my life was not working. And I was seriously, seriously depressed to the point of being suicidal. And I remember I would wake up every morning and say, how did this get to be my life? How did this get to be my life? And, if you ask yourself a question often enough, you get an answer.
Hmm.
And the answer that I got was I was half-hearted everywhere. In my work relationships, I was very transactional. I wasn't really committed to my clients. I was the hired gun. I'd show up, I'd do my work, and I'd leave. In my relationships, I had one foot in, one foot out. I wasn't very committed to my relationships. And so for me, I didn't have this language then, but for me, I knew that I had to find a way to become more wholehearted in my life. And I went on a quest. And my question was, how can I be more wholehearted? I started looking for how to do that in my relationships, in my work. I had to reinvent the way that I work as a coach. Before that happened, I did a lot of coaching, but it was mostly skills-based coaching, management skills or communication skills. I did a lot of training where I was delivering other people's material. And I had to really look inside and say, who am I? Why am I here? What do I have to offer? And why am I so afraid of putting myself out there and just creating something from myself in service to others? What's something that I could be wholehearted about? What could I give myself fully to? And so that was the beginning of what became Coaching from Essence. Most of what's in Coaching from Essence are really some ideas and models and frameworks, some that I created, some that I adapted, that literally were things that I cobbled together in order to save my own life.
Hmm.
Now, that said, I was doing a lot of work with executives and leaders. And so I am very familiar with the challenges that they are dealing with. And so I also have the language is also very friendly to people who are trying to create teams and organizations and so forth. And so it's on the one hand, it's really just about creating a life that you love. And on another hand, it's a language for creating things with people, collaborating, coaching as a leader, and creating more, going on a quest, turning your life into an adventure and being more creative with your life.
When this brings me into an interesting space where here's what I'm curious about now that you mention it. Use the word to create a life you love. And before that, you talked about this idea of why am I so afraid to?
Yes.
And so it occurs to me that there is a threshold in your language where you had to cross over that threshold in order to even start believing that you could create a life that you love.
Yes.
And then later to start creating it. We talked about the idea of life that you love, but it could be applied to anything: practice you love, clients you love, work you love, family you love, whatever. And so that transition seems to, there's a transition in belief that it was an impossibility and turned into a possibility, and then you put practices in place. Can you tell me a little bit about that transition?
How did I come to trust?
Yes. Let's look at that, because I think that is I find myself, I get stuck in that often, and and we can talk about that too. I call it dancing on the razor's edge, because at any moment in time it can tip one way or the other. And we can talk about how I've adopted your 4S to East idea as well for my own purposes. But I'm curious, how did that show up for you?
Well, let's talk about East, 4S and East for a minute, just so,
Sure.
because we mentioned it a couple of times, just so people understand what we're talking about, and then I'll talk about how I got to that.
How you got
For
to trusting.
how I got to trusting.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, we shorthand, I call it 4S, but it's self-interest, status seeking, scarcity, and survival. I think of those four things as the hidden curriculum. We're all taught that that's what will make us happy. You have to look out for yourself. You have to look good at all costs. There's not enough to go around, so you have to make sure that you get yours. And most importantly, you have to survive. But most of us don't really have a challenge of surviving. Most of us, certainly watching this, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, you've probably nailed survival. You're not in danger of not surviving. But what you are in danger of is losing your ego. So, our identity, our ego can be a little bit fragile. And so we're afraid of losing our sense of ourself. And if you've cobbled together a false self, or you've put together a way of being in the world that isn't really aligned or congruent with who you really are, which I think is true of most of us, then there's a lot of effort and fear in protecting that. Okay, so we're all navigating that. How do we get what we need? How do we look good? How do we get enough, and how do we survive? Okay. The reality is, for most of us, we've already accomplished that. And if we haven't, like if you haven't accomplished that as a coach, that's what one of the things that Coaching from Essence will do for you. It'll show you how to create a practice where you can support yourself, so that you don't have to be so self-interested anymore, and you don't have to worry about survival.
It's almost like an escape trajectory of orbiting around the same.
Yeah. I mean, the first task for all of us growing up is we have to learn how to survive in the world. We have to learn how to support ourselves and so forth. The problem with it is, even if you had parents who were supportive of you being as much of yourself as you can be and expressing as much of your true self, we live in a society that doesn't really support that. You go to school, you have friends, everybody wants to look good in front of each other. If you've ever been a teenager, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That sort of peak self-interest, self-image, right? So we're all trying to look good, and we're in a society that tells us that we're all missing something. We're all missing a product, we're missing a car, we're missing hair, we're missing, whatever it is, right? So we're always missing something. Every advertisement you see is telling you that your life would be better if only you had something you were missing. The idea behind Essence is we're not really missing anything. What we're missing is we're not expressing enough of who we are. And so what we want to do is create a form that's big enough for us to show up as fully as possible in the world and give our gifts, serve, express our natural value in the world. So the shift from self-interest, status-seeking, scarcity, and survival, the antidote, or the sort of the solution to that problem, once you've managed to survive, you found a way to support yourself, is essence, abundance, service, and trust. You start to realize that you have a natural way of being in the world. You have a way of being that's good. You have something to offer. Your life is valuable, and you have something to give that only you can give. And so it's important to express that. As far as I've been able to figure out, the key to happiness is the ability to express your best self in the world. If you can't express your best self, you will become depressed. Okay, so the more you express yourself, the happier you'll be. Abundance is once you begin to get in touch with who you are and to start expressing yourself, and once you practice gratitude, which is also one of the sort of core practices. When I was depressed, I read somewhere that if you're depressed, have a gratitude practice, which I thought was pretty silly, but I was desperate enough that I
Hmm.
did start to keep a gratitude journal. And what I realized in short order was my life was abundant. I had gratitude blindness. I couldn't see all of the things that I had, and more importantly, all of the things that I was, how much I had to offer. So the more grateful I was, the more I naturally became abundant. The more I was naturally overflowing and wanted to give myself away, wanted to be of service. So essence leads you to excuse me, essence leads you to abundance, and that leads you to service. When you realize that you have more than you could possibly need, you just want to start giving yourself away. You want to start helping other people. You want to start serving. You want to start expressing the things that you have that are valuable. And trust is really what your question is about. So now to come back to your
Right.
question, is trust is really about trusting that if you do that, if you create your life from essence and abundance and service, that the universe will support you. What we're all afraid of is that we need to become someone we're not in order to be supported.
Right.
We need to, I mean, for 30 years, I tried to be an edutainer.
Mm.
I worked for a training company, and that was sort of, that was how we talked about it. Like, we're edutainers. And that's just, I don't think of myself as an edutainer. I'm not really comfortable up in front of the room, naturally being funny and entertaining and so forth. Occasionally I might be, but that it's not who I naturally am. So, I would put on a suit and I would go do trainings at Fortune 500 companies, and I would pretend to be someone that I wasn't, delivering other people's material and so forth, which was fine. It was, good material, but I
Mhm.
wasn't expressing who I was because I didn't believe that the universe would support me if I did. I'll share a little interesting personal anecdote. You've met my beloved Michelle Paypal, um, who's just an extraordinary woman and human being. I mean, I just feel I'm the luckiest man in the world. But when I met Michelle about a year after we got together, I let her read all of my journals.
Mm.
I had kept a journal while I was I'd kept a journal for decades, off and on. I kept a journal that was about this thick when I was going through my depression. I printed one copy of it, and I let her read all of my journals. And when she was done, she said to me, you were writing about doing the kind of work that I'm doing now. I was writing about doing 20 years ago. She said,
Mhm.
why did it take you so long? And I thought about it, and the answer is I was afraid.
Yeah.
So that was trust. I didn't believe. I was afraid of rejection.
Mhm.
I was afraid of, status seeking. I was afraid of not looking good. I was afraid that I would embarrass myself. So we all have something worthwhile to create in the world, and we all have something valuable that we will find the people in the world who need and appreciate that. But you have to believe in that. You have to trust yourself.
Well, that's what I think the root of that question is that there's a certain point in time at which you have to choose to believe almost.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious how that came about for you, because you, like you mentioned, you were going through that period of time when it was a
Mhm.
pretty dark place. And was that almost a necessary ingredient for you to start gaining access to this agency of choice?
Well, I'll tell you what happened for me. The first thing that happened was I was so depressed that I was suicidal. Um, I used to, I used to do a lot of pacing in my apartment. I would pace, and sometimes I would ask myself this question: how did this get to be my life? How did this
Mm.
get to be my life? How did this get to be my life? I had managed to create the exact opposite of everything I thought I wanted. And then I got the answer, it was because I was half-hearted everywhere.
Mm.
And so I would be depressed. Sometimes I was so depressed, I would pace in my apartment and I would think to myself, could I just die?
Mhm.
You know, um, It's really hard to describe this, and I don't want to be dramatic about it, but I can empathize for anyone who's ever been there. And if you're there and you're listening, please get help, because if you are feeling suicidal, it's because your life has become so out of alignment and you're not expressing your essence. And it's a wake-up call. It's actually your best self trying to wake you up.
Mm.
So get help. So for me, I would also pace in my apartment and say to myself, I want to live, I want to laugh, I want to love again.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a mantra: live, laugh, love. The lowest day of my life, I had researched all these ways to kill myself. I went to Walmart to get, I'd read this obscure, complicated chemical formula of mixing all these, various household and chemicals. And I went to Walmart looking for these things. And of course I couldn't find them. But as I was leaving, there was an end of aisle display with these drinking glasses. And on the drinking glasses, it said, live, laugh, love.
Mm.
And I saw that. And I went out to my car and sat in the parking lot and wept.
Mm.
That was the lowest day of my life. So the answer to your question is, when I realized that I had gotten to a place in my life where I would kill myself, I thought, there's nothing that anybody else can do to me that's worse than that.
Mm.
So if I'm really at this place, there's no reason why I shouldn't just start living my life fearlessly, because there's nothing else that anybody can do to me that's worse than that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did. I mean, I became unafraid. Now, I don't recommend this as a way of becoming fearless. What I recommend instead is that you do the work to discover who you are, and you begin to go on a quest to create a life that is resonant with that. And the way you go on a quest is by doing small things, taking small steps.
Mm.
And that's part of what coaching from essence is about.
Yeah.
I talk about the difference between being on a path and a quest. And if you want to live your life as an adventure, you have to go on a quest.
The thought that popped up when you were mentioning that. So first of all, it's such a powerful story, right? It's I don't know how. Hopefully not very many people listening to this or watching this will have to come to that point to get access to that choice and to get that kind of experiential experience, to have that felt experience of what it's like to be there and have nothing to lose, and that really the only way is forward. And then you have at that point in time gained access to something that fear still prevents most of us from gaining access to, and that's that idea of, if I lived fearlessly.
Yeah.
So that speaks to the idea of an essential choice, which we can circle back to. And so what I'm really curious about is, having been there, so you experienced like the end of the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
And then you started working towards the other end of the spectrum, which is all the things that you've talked about with the essence, abundance, service, and trust, and the creating these forms and ways of serving people and ways of being that are more congruent with who you actually are, where you don't have to feel like you have to mask up anymore or pretend to be someone you're not.
Yeah.
Has there come a time for you where you have moved enough away from that bottom, where you have had, maybe this isn't the right way to phrase it, but it's the first word that comes to mind, where you've had something to lose, and at that point in time it would have been easy to slip back into the masking again?
We all have something to lose all the time,
Right.
but trust is, I trust. Well, let me back up a little bit. We talked about generosity. How the beginning practice of generosity is to give your money or time. Anybody with time can give time. Anybody with money can give money. Real generosity is really giving yourself, right? Really being open and generous with your being. I think of gratitude as the beginner's practice. Like, that's where you start. You start with gratitude. The beginner's practice of gratitude is to be grateful for all of the good things that happen to you. The advanced practice of gratitude is to be grateful for everything that happens to you.
Mm.
So I learned to be grateful for that dark passage. I wouldn't be who I am today without that. Or that's not quite accurate. I mean, I was who I am, but I wasn't living from who I am. I wouldn't
Right.
be living a life that is aligned with who I really am if I hadn't gone through that dark passage. Suicide is a message that some part of you has to die.
Mm-hmm.
And so my suicidal ideation was the realization that I had created a false self that was keeping me from really being in the world as myself,
Mm.
as my true self. And so that impulse to kill myself was the impulse to kill the false self.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to do the work of doing that. You know, the realization that I'd gotten to such a low point was liberating, but it's not required to make that essence choice to
Mm-hmm.
create from essence, abundance, service, and trust. What I did once I had that realization is I did what everybody needs to do, which is I started to do the work of getting in touch with my essence, asking myself, who am I really? Like, who am I naturally? What do I, what's my way of creating value that I can't not do? I have to do it. You know, what is it that I do that I can't stop myself from doing? One of the things I realized is I can't stop myself from having conversations with people about creating a life they love. I've been doing it ever since I was a kid. I just didn't have the label of coaching for it. But I've always been interested in what people are doing and what they're creating, and I've always become curious about how they might do that. So you know, I'm always naturally curious about patterns and making connections and networking and simplifying ideas and translating things into more simple, accessible, you know, ways of looking at them. So all of that has helped me to be a powerful coach. I think of all of those things as clues to my essence. Um, so, but you don't have to be suicidal. You don't have to make that. You don't have to go through that dark passage, or what I would call a dark ally.
Yeah.
You know, in order to make that choice. You begin by making the choice, you know, by having the realization that there's something askew about your life. There's something that is off.
You
And
know,
and then you begin to do the work. Yeah.
I was really curious about how you relate to it because the way that I have internalized what you taught us and what we
Mhm.
just talked about, it took me a while to really process it and adopt it for myself. And maybe I'll share that because it might resonate with some other folks
Sure.
as well. So
Yeah.
first of all, I love the idea that you gave us the 4 S's in the East because it makes it very clear.
Mhm.
And then I was thinking about it. Well, you know what? That those are the kinds of words that had specific meaning to you when you were going through your process and coming
Mhm.
out on the other side. And so then
Mhm.
I got to thinking, like, what does it look like for me? And so there's a couple of concepts that crossed paths, and I'm curious what your thoughts about
Mhm.
this are. So one was around this idea. I wanted to add some more texture to 4S and East. So what is it that actually what was my version of that? And so
Mhm.
one day I sat down, and I wish I would have brought my notebook down here, but I haven't. But I wrote down. I divided a page into two, and I just started writing on one side. This is me when I am afraid. This is me when, and I'll share some words here with you.
Yeah.
And on the other side, it was this is me in this essence, abundance, service, and trust mode,
Mhm.
plus more of my words. And so for me, it was things like on one side, it was regret, struggle, fear, scarcity, avoidance,
Mhm.
detachment, trauma, loneliness, and all of these kind of different things, status seeking, survival. And on the other hand, it was hope, contribution, trust, essence, presence, joy, emergence, awe.
Mhm.
And so
Love that.
I had a created more of these handles for myself that really
Mhm.
gave me some more texture of what are these sides like. And
Mhm.
then I remember I used to do this work quite a bit with clients in my coaching practice, where we would kind of identify this is the way that that you currently are, and something's not
Yeah.
quite vibing. So what does the best version look like? And so that connected with that idea of you know, the two wolves.
Yeah.
The native story about two wolves, and so, you know, the one you feed, and so then it connected around this idea of practicing, of switching into one over the other.
Mm-hmm.
So then what I noticed is that at a very macro level, it makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. So it can create, you know, you can intent into one way of being throughout the day. But I
Mm-hmm.
noticed that sometimes in the moment, inside of a conversation, I might flip one way or the other.
Yeah.
And so now I call it kind of like dancing on the razor's edge, because there
Mm-hmm.
is, you know, 4S on one side, and there's these and all of these other things on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And so I might react one way or the other, depending on who I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking to and how I might react.
Mm-hmm.
And then to me, that connected then to another idea from that I learned from Vipassana in one of the retreats, where the idea was that the more you practice, the more you grow your awareness, the deeper you go, the greater clarity you get. It's almost like your resolution increases. So it comes
Mm-hmm.
from this great choice of one or the other into a final, you know, molecule level choice of, in this moment, I'm going to go this way or that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that to be a fascinating way to think about it. That now my practice now is to start gaining access to that choice in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how does that resonate for you? Is that what your experience was like? Was that what your intent was with seeding this idea, to get people actually access to these different ways of being? Or how does that resonate for you? I'm curious.
Well, the first thing is, I love that you know, are making took the idea and made it your own, right?
Mm.
Like the whole idea of coaching from essence. If you're coaching from essence, that means you're coaching from your essence, not my essence. So I'm sharing some ideas. I think of the models and frameworks that I share as meta models. They're really models for creating from your essence. So anyone who, you know, learns the coaching from essence curriculum is going to show up differently as a coach. It's one of the reasons I don't certify coaches, because there is no set curriculum, or there's no one way to be a coach from essence. You have to make it yours. The idea is not for you to just, you know, or for a coach to just adapt wholesale everything that I present, or, you know, that I wrote in the book. It's all a way for you to discover for yourself your best way of working, and you can adapt and, you know, use some of the ideas and models that you learn from coaching from essence.
Let
So,
me just
so the first
interject
thing is,
here.
it's great that you're making this yours.
I just want to interject for one
Yeah.
second, for everybody tuning in and into the conversation with us.
Mhm.
It took me a while to start
Mhm.
making this some of my own. I think this is one of the things that Robert always
Yep.
talks about, the idea of being in your bones, so that you can start creating from it
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's what you know in your bones, right? Like you can learn a lot of stuff and it gets into your head. You know, you want to get it in your heart
Mm-hmm.
and then get it into your bones, where it's really yours, and it'll be different in your bones. And by the way, you already know something in your bones. So if someone is listening and they're thinking, well, I don't know if I could be a coach or whatever, if anyone who's listening to this knows something in their bones, they have some life experience that is valuable to somebody else, and they have their essence. You know, they have a natural way of being in the world that's valuable. So if anyone is listening to this and they're thinking, well, I'd like to be a coach, I would like to be of service, but I don't know how, or I don't know that I have anything to offer, that's not true. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I would tell them to read this.
yes, read the book Coaching from Essence. By the way, I've been sloppy here just so that I don't forget. You know, I've made the entire course completely free. There's a Coaching from Essence community. There's over 400 coaches now that are involved in the community. If you go to community.coachingfromessence.com, you can join the community. It's completely free. There's well over 100, probably a couple hundred hours of video on there. You can. There were 3 cohorts of the entire course that were videotaped, and you can go through the course 3 times there.
I just want to mention, before I officially joined the cohort that you did run, I went through all of those with a fine-tooth comb, and I found that the content that you shared, the ideas that you shared, were so incredibly valuable. For it
Mm,
completely transformed the way that I built my practice.
yeah. Awesome. Let's
So
talk about that in a minute, just so I don't forget.
yeah, yeah.
By the way, if you have questions, um, please put them in the comments. I'd love to answer some questions, take some questions from people who are listening. But also, if we don't get to your questions here, when you join the Coaching from Essence community, it's a forum platform, and you can post questions there, and I will answer them there.
Mhm.
And then also, there is a book, if you just want to get introduced to these ideas, the best sort of distillation of it is the Coaching from Essence book, which
It's like a reference manual.
yeah.
I'm also quite lucky because I was there at the retreat when you gave us this one,
Yes,
which
you
was
got
the original copy
the
with the
first.
fantastic model shot on the back. And I value this one quite a bit.
Yeah, that was the early version. It went through a couple edits after that.
I like early
Um,
versions.
and then, just so I don't forget, there are some other events that will be happening, and you can go to coachingfromessence.eventbrite.com to see what's happening with those upcoming events. There'll be another fireside chat with Sovic Garbushian on the 20. When is it?
21st, I think.
2 weeks from today, 21st. And we'll be talking about essence. She's done a lot of work adapting essence in her practice. So it's always exciting for me when I see that people are taking these ideas and really making them theirs and evolving them and developing them and being creative with them. That's awesome. So, oh yes, and I see in the comments, John mentioned that the retreat from September, there was, the first cohort of Coaching from Essence happened in January of 2020, right before COVID. And it was so much fun. There were 21 people met in a house in Brisbane, just south of San Francisco, for a long weekend. And I had such a great time doing that I had all these plans to do, more programs. And then COVID happened. So it all got moved online. And then last September, we had the first in-person retreat since the first cohort. And that was at Mount Madonna Center in Watsonville. And most of the recording is up on YouTube, and you can also watch that for free. So, and if you have questions and you're watching this, please post them in the comments. I'd love to take some questions. But to come back to what we were saying before, we did all this self-interested, status-seeking promotion. I'd love for you to talk about, so you were talking about how this has helped you with your practice. How are you? How have you worked with this material to create your practice as a coach?
We were talking about the essence choice, so maybe we'll circle back to it a little bit later. But I'll share a little about my experience. So first of all, I've gone through a lot of different trainings as a coach. Originally, I went through CTI, which is now I think called Coactive. I went through Positive Intelligence. I don't even remember what all the different courses are. I worked with a neuroscientist. I've taken psychology classes. I've been in other communities. And what I found, what resonated with me the most, so there was a thing. I mean, I also have a story that led me to this work that I look at as a calling. And previous to this, I had a digital marketing, digital strategy background. That was the company that I ran before. And once I made the transition into this work, I wanted to do something that was completely different and opposite of the way that I've done that work previously. So where it was less transactional, very relationship focused, intimate, long-term relationships. And I didn't necessarily have the context of how to do that. And so I find that the thing that you have enabled me to do before having gone through the Coaching from Essence and been in cohorts with you, that enabled me to do a few things. So one is to reshape the way that I look at my practice. So like I mentioned, generosity is now an integral part of my practice. I take on clients, whoever are the people that I think can help. And if I can make an offer to help them, if they don't have the ability to pay, for example, and if I feel I can take them on as a client, I will do. So that's now become an integral part of how I do work, which is something that I've never really considered before. The way there was, so that's one thing. I mean, there's so many others. I'll mention one other thing that was really transformational for me specifically. And that was, there were a few times when you coached me, either directly or indirectly, where the feeling that I had was that you believed in me enough so that I could actually start believing in myself.
Yeah.
And I think that if I look back through everything we've done, all the course contents, that was the most transformational thing that happened in our work together for me.
Yeah. That's one of the most important things that we do as coaches. When I first meet with a client, a lot of coaches think about the first meeting as some coaches think of it as a taster session. They do 15 minutes or 30 minutes or something like that. That's ridiculous. If you want to get high fee clients, you're not going to get a high fee client talking to somebody for half an hour. I do my initial sessions with the client we block out 2 hours. We don't always need all of that time, but we block out 2 hours. I want to have a conversation where I can create some real value for that person. But more importantly, I want to create a relationship with that person. I want to start building trust with that person. And even more important than that, I want to invite that person to dream a true dream, to think about what could be possible for them if they started really creating what it is that they truly want. And that's more challenging than you might think on the surface. What my observation is, most people come to a coach because they have a problem. They have some pain. It's either a problem that they want to solve, usually with a person. It might be a process that isn't working. It could be a project that they're starting that they need help with. It could be a purpose. They're lost, or they're contemplating a career change or something like that. But they're always coming to you with some pain, almost always coming to you with some pain. Rarely does someone come to a coach and say, I have a vision of something I want to create and I want you to help me get there. They come to you because they're in pain and they want some help with their current situation, or often really the past. So the first thing I do is I want to create as much value as I can for them around whatever they present, so that they walk away with real value from the conversation. In doing that, I also want to build a relationship. I want to find out who this person is, and find out whether or not they're my ideal client, because I have very specific criteria for who I work with. My practice has always been very small. I rarely have worked with more than a dozen clients at a time, and always at least a third to a half of them have been pro bono. And the reason for that is because I really love working with entrepreneurs who are just starting out. By the way, I'm not building a practice right now. So, but my aim was always to provide value, and then to help the client dream. So most clients will come to you, and if you invite them to dream and say, well, look, what would be possible if you were to create anything that you really wanted, what would you create? Or if you didn't have these problems and you could create whatever you wanted, what would you create? What would that look like? And if you ask people that, most people will give you a very small version of what they really want. Or they'll give you a dream that isn't even theirs. It's their parents or their spouses or their bosses or societies, or
what they think they have.
Again, it'll be a dream that they think that will get them self-interest, status seeking, scarcity, and survival. And so what I try to do is help them discover the real dream. What is it that their essence is dreaming of? What is their real longing that they've been longing for? And by the way, we're talking about this. We've been talking about this in very personal terms, but this is also very much true for leaders. When I work with executives and you ask them about if if you ask an executive what they want, what most of them will answer is to not have the problems that they have that brought them to you. If you ask them, well, okay, so what if you didn't have these problems? Then what would you really want? Like if you could see this organization become anything you wanted, what is it you're really wanting for this organization? And then you get a different dream.
Yeah.
Now, our role as coaches is to invite and evoke a true dream from our clients. And when we do, then our work is to believe them.
Mm-hmm.
So when I coached you and I asked you what you wanted, who you wanted to be as a coach, and you told me, I believed you.
Mm-hmm.
And when you forget, I remind you. That's a big part of our role as coaches. It's not for me to tell you what your dream should be. It is for me to tell you when I think your dream is not an authentic dream.
Mm-hmm.
My role is to help you really find the dream that you're really longing for, that's really congruent with who you are, and to create that. But once you tell me what that is, I believe you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm committed to helping you create that.
I meant to ask you if that was an intentional practice, and it sounds like it is, because that was a transformational thing for me. I mean, there isn't a lot of it mentioned in our previous conversations, or maybe even in the book, but this is what you just mentioned is something that I believe is one of those secret sauce things that you bring to the table. And I think really, really, really good coaches bring to the table. It's something that I have to make sure to practice with intent.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly powerful. It was transformational for me. I mean, that alone was one of the things that allowed me to go after the kinds of clients that I really wanted, to position myself in a more confident way, get into networking conversations, and say who it is who I am and what I do with confidence. And that changes the nature of the relationship. And so I think that was a really transformational thing for me. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'm also, I'm cognizant of time.
Yes.
So I know that I think we have to end here shortly. I want to share a couple of things with you in regards to a couple of other things that really resonated for me. And there were two other things that so first of all, this is like, there's so many models here that I introduced to clients. A to B, fantastic, is something that I use quite often. I even have often when I do this work with clients, I draw them these. So we talk about what this is A to B. Here's what that looks like. The B thing. So this is another one. The triple loop learning is another one that gives me access into being in essence. So from a practical perspective, and from a kind of greater perspective, client criteria was another thing that I really resonated with you on. And I think partially it's because you were going after similar clients as the ones that I wanted, that the way that you approached it, to know that it was possible, opened up a lot of things for me. So I wanted to share that just for the folks that are
thanks for that.
listening.
I mean, that gives people a sense that, again, coaching from essence is a loose collection, network of ideas, models, frameworks, values, principles that help us to do more powerful work, helping others, create a life they love, create a successful organization. I say that not all life coaching is executive coaching, but all executive coaching is life coaching. So we have to do both. I believe very strongly you can't separate who you are personally from who you are professionally. So we only have a couple minutes. I just want to say, again, I've made the course completely free. You can join the Coaching from Essence community at community.coachingfromessence.com. I've given it all away. And, the reason for that is not just because it helps me, obviously, if more people know about this work, but because I sincerely believe that the world needs more coaches who are doing this kind of work. And so
from the right place, I want to interject there. From the right place.
From the right place, from an attitude of generosity and service. If you just want to get rich, there are other programs that will help you do that. I teach practice building. I teach you how to create. I really believe that anybody can create a multiple six-figure practice, but that's not the focus of my work. I will teach you how to create a practice so that you can thrive and sustain yourself to do meaningful work in the world. Yes. But please join the community. If you have questions, post them in the forum when you join. I'll answer them there, and get the book. And more events coming up, coachingfromessence.eventbrite.com. Ernest, thank you so much. I mean, I really enjoyed this.
Robert,
this all started because we were just having a conversation and having so much fun that I said, hey, maybe we should do this live so other people can enjoy it.
I appreciate you taking the time to connect with me too. I hope this was valuable for everybody that's listened now and will listen in the future. I think we have plans to maybe do one or two more, where we can maybe explore that dark night of the soul even more, in the dark ally. That might be something that might be interesting. And I'm really looking forward to your next live with Zovig as well.
Yeah. And all the events are on coachingfromessence.eventbrite.com. And thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here. Ernest, thanks so much.
Hey, I'm more than happy to support you on this journey. You've been such an incredibly positive influence on my life. So thank you.
Great. Thanks. Bye, everyone.